Hello, so I'm playing a video game in Chinese, and this is a video game called Deltarune, and it was one of the first things that I wanted to try to immerse in when I was a beginner in Chinese. And this may seem a bit strange to say, but you can use almost anything that you want in order to learn Chinese. And back in the day when, well, I was still in high school Chinese, and trying to ask my teacher for recommendations. A lot of the recommendations that were given to me, not just by my teacher, but also by the majority of the internet and also my classmates, gave me things like Chinese dramas and donghua. And don't get me wrong, some of them are really, really nice. However, I was also not used to watching things like dramas and TV shows. I wanted to do things like, play video games, read comics, and watch YouTube videos. But those were things I did not have any access to. And as a result, I spent a lot of time trying to look for those things that would genuinely interest me. In fact, going so far to even trying things like anime in Chinese. Yes, anime dubbed in Chinese. Who would have guessed? And after trying to search for so long and now finally getting to the point where I can very, very comfortably enjoy the things that I like, and also I can find new things I like in Chinese as well. So I just want to give you today that you can use almost anything to learn Chinese, regardless of how bizarre or weird or outlandish your interests might be, whether it be similar to mine, like playing video games in Chinese or reading comics, or even, I don't know, right here, like reading self-improvement books in Chinese too. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm going to teach you today how you can find these interests and why you can learn almost anything with Chinese, no matter what people will tell you. 那首先你不知道我是谁的话，我给你一个自我介绍，可以随便做。那这是错的，因为这两个东西比你想象中强的很多，所以呢，不要否定它。我叫 Vero， 不是我本名，可是这是我网站的绰号。还有呢，我也学中文了2个半年前。首先，我想给你介绍一下是为什么你的兴趣和爱好比你想象的还重要。因为如果你学了中文，也用你的兴趣和爱好学到了用它帮你学中文的，那你学中文的旅程会轻松的很多。因为如果你是被强迫的读一个你不喜欢的一本书，对吗？但是你会觉得你会学到了很多东西吗？是你高中的时候他们给你一本书，说你必须读完这本书和你要写一个文章，关于它是什么和为什么这叫是心理学的 blah 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 你不会学到的。可是如果你看一本书，还是不是一本书，还是你看一个影片，你喜欢这个影片，是那个我可以举个例子，那个 oversimplified 的影片会给你介绍一下那些历史，会给你讲那些历史，和他们是用很简单的动画就给你介绍，和他们就让这个话题变得很有趣，和因为它变得有趣，你会觉得你学到了更多，对吗？那也是学中文一样，还是学外语一样，是如果你可以利用你的爱好，你可以利用你的兴趣，你可以学得更快。所以呢，这是我大推荐的，是如果你觉得我的兴趣，我的爱好这没什么了，but sometimes the most popular things aren't going to be the things that you like the most. Like I said earlier before, a lot of people try to recommend things like Chinese dramas and Chinese animations to me, but I just didn't really find it so interesting. Even things like podcasts, for example, that even now I find interesting today. Back in the day, I really didn't like watching or listening to podcasts at all, and it would just bore me a lot compared to just simply, well, trying to force feed yourself things that you know are good for you, but you really don't like in, well, the first place. It's just going to make things a lot more harder. So now that I've already talked about how your things like interests and hobbies are going to be really, really important, then now let me go introduce you to pretty much the real and naturalness example that people would also complain. Let's say, for example, oh, I want to play video games and I want to do this, all these things. But they're going to say, oh, but these things are not natural to learn Chinese. And if you learn to use in Chinese, then you're going to only speak with video games. Is that right? Well, actually not really as well, because even though you do embrace your things like your interests and hobbies and use those to learn Chinese to the fullest and actually immerse in content that you like, there is going to be some people that will tell you things like, oh, but this thing is unnatural. Oh, this thing is never seen before. Oh, this thing, that thing, that thing. And the only thing that you should immerse in is things like Chinese dramas or read textbooks or actually get a Chinese class so that you can actually learn to speak conversationally. But that's also something that isn't really that true as well, because come to think of it, when you are playing a video game or let's say watching something that you are like to do in, well, English or whatever your native language is, do you ever sometimes just sit down and think saying, that sentence is pretty awkward and unnatural, unless maybe the character in a video game like talks intentionally in a very archaic way? I don't think you probably ever sat down and thought about it. Yes, of course, in video games, for example, there's going to be lots of things and let's say items that you won't see a lot in real life. And things like TV dramas, there are going to be characters saying really, really corny and cringe jokes that you're going to be like, I don't want to say that in real life as well. But even though there are these unnaturalness in, well, pieces of content, you also have to realize that we can still understand these pieces of content despite them being unnatural. And pretty much, if you're going to do the same in Chinese, then that would be the same thing. It's just pretty much, well, the thing that you want to watch, the thing that you want to play, the thing that you want to read just has a little bit of flavor to it. The base itself is still, well, Chinese. All the grammar, all the vocabulary is still intact. If I were to give you a word in Chinese, for example, 苹果, and you say it, and you see the word for apple in, let's say, a video game, and you see an apple word for apple in, let's say, for example, a TV show, then these two things, do they mean different things when I put them in different pieces of content? No. And that just pretty much explains that all pieces of content at least is natural enough in order to have native speakers understand, and it's close enough to what the daily conversations are so that you can understand them as well. Pretty much this applies to almost every single piece of content, and even things that I consider unnatural, let's say things like music, where even in your native language, you're just going to be, let's say, listening to it and you're not really going to be actually, going and actually, well, trying to study the language, right? You're just going to be vibing to the music. Even though it's things, you can actually, pause it, look at the lyrics, and also like mind the lyrics if you really, really, really like the song. Pretty much, I want you to follow this rule from now on, which is, if it's good enough for natives, it's good enough for me. Okay, so how do we learn effectively this way? Because now that I've gotten rid of your limiting beliefs regarding how to learn Chinese with anything that you want, how do we actually do this effectively? Because the first thing that we have to do, and the most commonly recommended piece of advice given, is that we should go get the show and sentence mine it, get all the vocabulary, put it into Anki, and then learn it this way. This is also advice that I have given beforehand. However, there's a bit of a problem with this advice, which is that, well, first of all, number one, for beginners and complete zeros, it's going to be extremely hard, especially if it's something that you haven't, let's say, watched or played before in English, where you're going to be training a lot more to understand everything, and you might as well just be adding every single word into Anki. Second of all is that once you've already done this with a certain show, the problem is that you're usually not going to come back to this topic or niche if you're not careful, where you'll just pretty much finish one show in a language and then maybe, let's say, one video game in a language, and then you'd hop on to the next thing. And because of that, you didn't have enough time to focus on, let's say, the certain vocabulary that you could get in this video game. And then what happens is that, well, you just forget it a lot easier. Definitely hopping domains is an important part and learning how to branch out your languages. But at this point, what we want to do first is be able to focus on one domain, one sort of topic or niche, get really good at that, and then be able to hop on it, not just pretty much constantly hopping around and trying to get yourself confused, especially when you're still a little bit new to language learning. So how do we actually, find the content first of all? Because there's a couple of ways you could do this. Well, first of all is you could actually search the thing that you like in Chinese. Let's say, for example, 中文, which is, let's say, if you type a keyword in 中文, it probably will give you, let's say, a couple of keywords. You could put that keyword into, let's say, YouTube, or let's say Bilibili, or any other, let's say, YouTube video platform. And then you could find videos regarding that thing. If you're trying to look for things like TV shows, then or video games, what I recommend is actually use the word 中文版, which is pretty much just another way of saying, Chinese version. And then you can pretty much find TV shows, let's say, that either can be dubbed or subbed, and you can pretty much figure out very quickly whether or not a show is dubbed or subbed in a language, because, if you find something dubbed, it usually would say paying. However, if it's only in, subtitles, then you're probably out of luck. But there's still one more last thing that you can try doing, which is using the keywords 一口气说完. Now, what does this mean? It's pretty much just another way of just saying, in one breath, let's say you just finish saying everything, which pretty much it's going to be the same thing as those 30-minute YouTube videos that talk about, let's say, a TV show, but instead they just condense all of it into 30 minutes because people are just too lazy to watch the entire thing. That's pretty much what 一口气说完 is. So those are some ways in order to actually go and get the content that you need and want in order to learn Chinese if you have another, let's say, interest in it. If you, let's say, have, let's say, interest in other things, or you want to, let's say, find a translated version of your piece of work. However, though, the first thing that you want to do is, once you've actually found this, the first thing that you would want to do is you would just simply want to, let's say, whatever it is, let's say you found a YouTube video regarding, let's say, fitness, or let's say, 3D modeling, or if you found something, let's say, regarding, Deltarune, the game we just played, and you pretty much just want to go into it and simply just relax and enjoy it. Just don't try to strain yourself and learn as much as you can. Just simply try to just free flow it, immerse in it. Just simply try to, notice words. And if you're lucky, and this actually comes up a lot more often than you think, is that you're actually going to be able to notice words a lot better because you already are knowledgeable in this niche, in this sort of video game. And then it's going to be a lot easier to, let's say, pick out certain, let's say, vocabulary words that you probably may not have found initially if you've only gotten into something new in Chinese. And then once you've actually found, let's say, these things, then of course, you could just keep going on and then doing it. But after you pretty much go through the entire, let's say, video game, or let's say you've watched an entire YouTube video, or let's say a couple of YouTube videos, then what I want you to do now is simply, the good old-fashioned method of, sentence mining those words, and pretty much go back to it, and then, sentence mine, learn the vocabulary as well, and then pretty much put it your Anki, and then once you pretty much sentence mine this entire, word, that's pretty much where most people will end. But you're actually not going to end here. What you're going to do is pretty much you're going to go and, if you're going to go for a video game, what you want to do is you want to go and pretty much go for the same thing as 一口气说完, and also finding YouTube videos online, and further be able to, let's say, get people talking about it, let's say, because if you just, let's say, play a video game, that's one thing. But if you actually see someone play the video game, you actually can run into a lot more new vocabulary and a lot more new things where they're going to be able to explain things. Let's say, for example, I jumped, or let's say I killed this enemy, where in a video game you may come across these words, but it's going to be a lot more repetitive and also a lot better if you have someone actually explain it to you, because not only you actually get to see, let's say, the characters again, but actually characters talking again, but you actually have someone that's also commentating on it and also giving their extra input on it too. And that's going to be very, very useful to know. And if you're someone that's more in, let's say, watching TV shows, or let's say watching things and topics about YouTube videos, what you could try doing is actually trying to branch out, let's say, your specific thing. Let's say, for example, you've been only, let's say, using fitness again as example. Let's say if you've only been, let's say, watching videos about, let's say, I don't know, let's say let's say dieting, for example. And then now you can then move on to videos that are more, a little bit more aimed toward, let's say, actually exercising. And then those pretty much, it's still within, let's say, the same sphere. However, it's at least overlapping a little bit so that you can better understand this thing and then understand another thing and understand other things. And then soon you're going to be able to master this domain a lot quicker compared to simply just, well, consuming one piece of content and then not using it again, and then, well, trying to move on to the next or like look for something else. And another disclaimer as well is that this method also heavily relies on how abundant your content is that how much, well, of your content actually exists in a certain niche. If we're going to go a bit more broad, let's say the fitness example, then you're going to find a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people on Bilibili that talk about. However, if you go a bit too, well, narrow down and niche, there are videos talking about it. There are, let's say, a good amount of people. However, trying to then rely on, let's say, all these people, and let's say try to keep, let's say, mining, you will get to a point where you're not going to be able to find a lot more new content as well. And the best solution I can give for this is that in the meantime, let's say while you're, let's say, mining certain videos, what you can try to do is then move on to another, let's say, piece of content, let's say a TV show, or let's say another video game that is also very similar to, let's say, Deltarune, let's say, for example, an RPG game, or let's say a fantasy, let's say, TV show. And then you can then watch these things and you could technically have a lot of overlap of characters and also vocabulary with it. So at the same time, you're still going to be learning, but also you're not as well trying to, well, just go way off somewhere and then you're not going to be focused on, let's say, one certain domain anymore. So that's just one disclaimer, because when I was also trying to find, let's say, certain interests, let's say, for example, I don't know, also when I was playing things, let's say, that's the only weakness I could say that you need to find with this method, is that you need to have at least abundant content available. So if you can even content available, not only just abundant content available, but also think to yourself that, is this niche I'm trying to chase a bit too small for me? Because let's say, for example, same thing. If we're going to be talking about, let's say, video games, if I only want to play horror games, you could still find a good amount of them, but your options are going to be reduced drastically. And if you actually only just focus on one game only, then what's going to happen is that, well, you're going to only have this one game available to sentence mine, and you better hope that this game is big enough so that it's going to be able to support all your immersion needs. Just to recap again, pretty much what I want you to do is find something that you've liked beforehand, or maybe something new. Watch that, and pretty much what I want you to do is I want you to just watch it, just enjoy it. Then once you've finished enjoying it, then you can either find a YouTube video explaining it, or you could actually go back into the show and actually try to mine the words. And once you're actually done with finding someone that actually has mined the words, then try to find something similar in that domain that you're doing. Let's say, for example, not even just fitness anymore, but let's say, for example, I don't know, fantasy, for example. You could find, let's say, another, let's say, fantasy TV show, and then sort of like, slowly conquer that one, or maybe even find certain videos that, in order to help you better, well, understand one niche or one domain, so that you can pretty much very, very easily maneuver in that one, and then soon you can go to the next one and then learn and do the same thing over again. And if you're interested as well, check out my Chinese communication course description. This is a tactic that I teach my students as well. So if you're interested in learning more about how to, well, listen, read, and also speak Chinese, then, well, check it out. And we have Road to Explore, 我们的旅程刚刚开始, and thank you for watching. And any questions you have, you can also check out my Instagram.